guys. Working on our writing. You guys are doing fabulous on your writing. I'm very proud of you. Okay, so keep that up. So today, I've seen some of you working on your story planning, your fairy tale planning guide. Okay, so remember we have this section here that is your setup. That's your background information. Talking about if we go back and look at our Goldilocks book that we read, right? That's setting up Goldilocks. It's talking about her, or actually, it starts off with the three bears, right? Talks a little bit about the three bears, and then it introduces us a little bit to Goldilocks. This is the first small moment. That's kind of what happens first. They make breakfast, they set things out. It was too hot or whatever, and they decide to go on a walk, right? And then this next section, these are what we're going to be adding today. So this is tells what the trouble is, okay? And then you have how things are wrapped up. All right. So in your story planning guide, that's what you're going to be writing, okay, today. A little bit more, and that's where the third section, that's where your trouble begins, okay, for your characters. Could be one or it could be a couple. And so look back on our book, The Goldilocks. Again, you can go find that on Epic, right? Typing Goldilocks and Three Bears. That should come up. And I would advise you to go do that so that way you can kind of get refreshed again. So when did her trouble begin for Goldilocks? Do we know? All right. And when she knocked on that door and nobody answered. So what does she do? Does she decide to leave because nobody was there? No, right? She goes in, and I'm like, well, man, that's really going to get her in trouble. So she goes in, and then what happens? That's when she gets herself into some trouble. She tests out the porridge, right? She tests out the chairs, and oh my goodness! And then what she does, she breaks a chair, right? Well, then of course she decides, well, I'm a little tired, so I'm going to go take a nap. Okay. So that's kind of rude, right? How many of you? I don't go and knocking on the door and nobody's home. I don't go walk in and help myself to food and break something and then go to sleep. I don't do that, right? So that's what you're thinking about. You're telling your story, and in this case with the Goldilocks, that kind of happened a couple of times, right? She went in when she was not invited. She eats somebody's food. Well, that alone is enough to get her in trouble. Then she goes and she finds these chairs. Well, one's too big, one's too small, one's just right or whatever, right? She sits in it and then somehow breaks it. Well, that's another part of trouble. Then she just gets tired, excuse me, and she finds a place to sleep. Well, that's alone that can get her in trouble. So when you're crafting your fairy tales, remember each of those sections, each one of these sections, your setup. You're telling this in small moments. You're telling it bit by bit. And then in your background information, or what kind of happened first, you're telling this section bit by bit into small moments. The trouble, what we were just talking about with Goldilocks, we could tell that into bit by bit pieces, small little bits of information that work together. Okay. So she, you need to, in your fairy tales, you need to make sure that your characters can and do get into some type of trouble, right? Because it's typically what happens in a fairy tale. Something happens, usually a series of events happen, and that's what you did, and that's what happened in Goldilocks, right? And then what happened? Goldilocks woke up, she ran away, and she was never seen again. Okay, now think back to our adaptation book, the Brownie Locks and the Bowls of Cornflakes, right? That was a little different. It was similar, but the author chose to change a few things. Remember, we talked about dominoes. When you make one domino fall, the next one falls, the next one falls, and the next one falls. Kind of like in your fairy tales, you change one moment, one domino, but everything should continue to happen. Some things need to change. It doesn't like, well, it was a bear instead of Goldilocks, but the same things happen. That's not really adapting. You're just changing like one character, right? They need to come in different things need to happen. And if you go back and you look at the Brownie Locks book that we talked about, you can go on Epic. That end was a lot different. Whereas Goldilocks tended to, she woke up and ran away. The bears never saw her again. How was the other one different? Well, one, the little boy wished that the bear Brownie Locks would come back, right? And eventually that bear did. And the bear and that little boy became good friends. So those are small moments that the author made adaptations to tell that story, to tell that fairy tale. Everything kind of went together. All right. So the author took Goldilocks and adapted it. And like, remember, like the dominoes, each change led us, the reader, down the path in the story that made sense. Okay. So again, you have your brainstorming sheet, your fairy tale planning guide, this thing right here to kind of help you. Also, you'll notice in your under the writing tab, under the writing section in your Google Classroom, in our Google Classroom, there is a writing section in there. So that way you can go back and you can even it's set up much like this. Obviously, you can't fold it into force like it is here. It does have the same headings on there for you. That way, you can continue working on this if you want to until you get it full, and or you could transfer everything that you have done here into that Google doc. It's a Google Doc that has those sections listed in it, so that way you can see, or I can see, what you're working on. Because some of you have shown me this, which is fine, but now we're going to transition this week into putting your work into that Google Doc, so that way I can see what you're working on. Okay. So continue writing. You guys are amazing writers. I love your creativity. You guys did a lot of good research. You've done a lot of good work. So now we're focusing on the third and fourth part of our planning sheet, right? Tell what the trouble is and how things get wrapped up. Remember to tell these into bit by bit small moments. So that way everything adds up and everything is put together, is kind of weaved together. And if you need to, go read the Goldilocks and the Three Bears. Then go read Brownie Locks and the Three Bowls of Cornflakes to kind of see how you can adapt. I'm sure you guys don't have such great ideas. Just keep those flowing and going, okay? So nice work and keep up the great work.